just have conviction that what you're doing is actually the right thing, and you can be uncertain and still be confident that what you're doing is the right thing. You can kind of carry those two things in your mind, and we'll talk a bit about that today, because there's a lot going on in the world. I'll show you some tips and tricks that I've relied on over the more than a decade doing this now, and we can go from there. So, if everything's good on your end, yeah, cool audio feedback. I think just let me know if it doesn't pan out right with the audio. Just let me know, and I'll make sure that there's nothing untoward going on my end. Half of people are saying the audio is fine, other half are saying it's all good. So I'll continue on for now. And if it gets really bad, if I start sounding like an alien, it's probably not me. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and if you are wondering, like, is this going to be available on playback? Like, if you want to go over it one more time, it will be. It will be on the Perla YouTube channel. So don't need to worry about like doing some quick little snaps or trying to say, "Oh, I wonder what he said." Do I need to follow that up? It will all be available, so you don't need to worry about that. So we're going to be talking about investing 500 bucks. Today's episode is more like beginner focused. But then we're going to have some Q&A. So if you want to dive into some more advanced topics and stuff like that, you can hang around, you can enjoy the first part, and then we'll get on with the more advanced stuff towards the end. So just before we begin, as usual, we are in Australia, and this actually plays into what we're going to talk a bit about today, about being like picking a good investment platform or like a brokerage account and how to do your checks and balances. And so, one of the things that you might hear me or people at Pearler or many other places say is a general financial advice warning. So, basically, anything that you listen to or hear or see today is strictly general information only. In the finance world, we call it general financial advice. It's a bit of a weird word or term. What we really mean is general financial information. We don't take into account your needs, your financial goals, or your objectives. So don't necessarily go and act on the information thinking that it's for you. If you're unsure of it, you should always speak to a financial advisor before acting on the information because they can take into account your needs, goals, and objectives. And of course, read the PDS, and I'll explain what one of those is in just a few minutes before you go and invest in something that you're not sure about. You're fully across it. David, you've asked, can you provide a link to the YouTube channel where the recording will be published? Yes, we will. It is, you can just Google, or when you jump onto YouTube, just search for the Perla YouTube channel. Why don't I do that for you right now? It just looks like this. And here it is. I don't want to get like an infinite loop because it says we're going live, but I'll just pop it in the chat now for you there, mate. So, let's continue on past disclaimers because they are brilliant. This is me before the Iran US war. This is me today. Just a little joke, but my name's Owen Rask. I started a company called the Rask Group in 2017. That's how most people know me nowadays. And I've been doing this thing called investing for a very long time. And got all the things as we'll talk about today. But I think most people are familiar with me doing live shows and podcasts and these types of things, and I love doing them and I love hearing from you. So if you want to reach out after the show, that is totally fine. You can do that. You can find me at ras.com.au. Okay, so rather than go straight with like let's dive into investing your first $500, I want to kind of acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is that right now there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. And that stuff has a huge impact on the stock market. And not just the stock market, it will eventually affect the property market. It will eventually affect the bond market, or it already is. You can see it's already affecting gold prices. And of course, it's already affecting oil prices, which is why you're paying more if you have a combustion engine like a diesel or a petrol car, you're already paying more. 2 weeks ago, we also heard Reese, which is an ASX listed company. So a company here in Australia, Reese, that does all the plumbing supplies. They said that they're going to increase prices 30% because of the oil situation, because oil is actually used in all the pipes and stuff that are in your house or where you work. So all that stuff gets more expensive. And this is what happens when you start thinking like an investor, just like Zoom at the top of the show. We start to think, what's going on in the world? How does that affect me? What are the stocks or businesses that going around and making all this happen, or the problems that are occurring, what impact does that have? How does that affect my superannuation? Because those are just investments. What are all these things doing? And I wanted to start with this because there's always something to worry about when you start to think this way. I have never invested a day in my life where there wasn't some big macroeconomic or political force or thing happening that I didn't know about. Because like right now, we've got the Iran, US, Israel conflict, got oil prices, we've got the Ukraine, Russia war, we've got potential high inflation here at home. We've got all these things going on with AI and the uncertainty that AI is going to create for all of our jobs. So many things for people to worry about. But here's where the rubber meets the road. Um, we had two hugely destructive world wars in the early 1900s. Huge, like terrible things that happened. But as this chart right here in front of you shows, the stock market still went up over the long term. That had pretty significant consequences on what the returns were and how the market behaved, but it still went up. We have had the Cuban Missile Crisis. We've had huge issues with politics in here, and I'll show you more and more things to do with this and the data that kind of backs this up as we go through. But effectively, even in this time, people may not remember the Australian dollar. We look at that kind of when we go traveling or when we try to buy something from overseas, the Australian dollar, the currency. People might not remember that wasn't always just like bouncing up and down. That used to be fixed in Australia. So that happened here. We had COVID in here. We had all of these other things. And you can see still over time, the stock market went up. So when it comes to thinking about investing, probably the most powerful thing if you're a beginner watching this today, or even if you're more advanced, is just to consider the time horizon that you look at something. So these two charts here and the emotions that go with them are actually showing you the same stock market, which is the United States stock market. One is 6 months on the left-hand side, and one is 35 years or something. So you can see this difference, like it's the same thing, we're just looking at it differently. The problem with money and investing and finance when it comes to this stuff is we don't think, like our emotions aren't anchored to decades. Like we don't just instinctively think in terms of decades. What we do instinctively think about is kind of the fight or flight mentality. So we're thinking about the here and now today. Um, I remember when I first came across Perla. I think I said this in the first ever presentation that I did with Perla many, many years ago. When you click on a company in the Perla platform, so let's say we just click on this ETFs. Let's say, where's something boring? CBA, that's pretty boring. Commonwealth Bank, let's go to that. So when you click on Commonwealth Bank as a share inside your Perla brokerage account, notice there's something very, very, very interesting that happens on Perla that doesn't happen anywhere else that I've ever seen. The thing that happens is the stock chart that you see in front of you defaults to a 10-year time horizon. So I could change it to 1 year and it doesn't look very good for Commonwealth Bank. It looks okay, but not good. I could change it to 1 month. It's okay. But if I change it to 10 years, I see, wow, look, it's actually doing really well. And what Perla actually did and the decisions that the Perla team made was we don't want you to think like every other stupid brokerage platform out there that tries to get you in a panic, or the news that tries to get you in a panic. We're going to try and convince you that the best thing you can do, whether you're a beginner or advanced, is to think like a long-term investor. And that was a very deliberate decision. And you can see that here. And it's actually why I became so fond of Perla in the very first instance. Like when I first saw it, I was like, wow, I've never seen a platform do that before. That is so cool. And it kind of goes to like the ethos of what Perla does. And the reason I like that is because it orients all of us to actually what's important, which is the long term. And you can see that here. Everything's been pretty shaky recently, but if you zoom out, it's actually pretty darn good. So on today's agenda, we've already talked about the great wall of investing. It's the wall of worry. The origins of the kind of quote of markets climb a wall of worry, meaning that there's always something to worry about, but the stock market still goes up. Um, that is loosely attributed to Sir John Templeton, but if you remember the quote, stock markets climb a wall of worry, it does two things for you. It reminds you that there's always something to worry about, and it reminds you that the longer you invest, the more you've kind of got to expect that those things are going to happen, but it's going to be okay. So we're going to talk about like what holds people back from investing. I'm going to tell you how to check to see if like a brokerage account or something like that is legitimate. I'm going to talk about the difference between micro investing and brokering platforms, different custodial and HIN models, what that means, how to overcome analysis paralysis, the core and satellite methodology, and Q&A. In the next session, because this is the first of many sessions we're going to do this year, in the next few sessions, I'm going to be coming back and we're going to be talking about like why index funds are so good. Um, we're going to talk about investment goal setting and not just like the boring stuff like have a short, medium, and like then long-term goal. Like what does it actually mean and what does it mean for your wealth? Like I see this because we have a financial planning business and I see the difference between people who set goals and people who don't. And um, if you're a motivated person and you set a goal, you're more likely than not going to achieve it. And that's what I've seen with thousands of people. So we'll talk about that. And then we're also going to talk about tax and investing and all that sort of stuff and how you can save money and just have a better tax return if you're an investor coming up in a few months. So many of you will know this. Some people who are diehard investors and don't really have much else going on in their life. No, I'm kidding. But people like myself who just love investing will be familiar with this chart. And this is from Vanguard, one of the biggest ETF providers and index fund providers in the world. Um, and what it actually shows you is the performance of different stock markets around the world and even property um, over a very long period of time. So this is from 1995 to 2025, and it shows you the different returns over time. It gives you some averages down here too. And what you can see is that, say, over 30 years, because longer is better in this case, the US stock market is 10.8% per year. Australian shares 9.3%, international shares, which might include like Europe, Japan, and all those types of places as well, it's 8.3% per year. Australian property is 8%. Australian bonds, which are pretty boring but important, 5.5%. Like the average return on your cash accounts, like term deposits and stuff like that, is 4.1% per year. And inflation, which is the last one, was 2.6%. So you can see just generally like the stock market has done pretty well. The reason that people think the stock market is like gambling is because they don't understand it. And second to that is they're impulsive. They're thinking about the stock market in terms of like a 1 day or a 1 month or a 1 year return. Um, I have done a lot of research on this, obviously, over the years. And one day I kind of got a bit of energy, a rush of blood, and I decided to go back and analyze 150 years of stock market data. And what I found was that on average, the stock market falls. I use US data for this, by the way. On average, the stock market falls 1 in every 5 years. And 1 in every 5 of those 5 years, so 1 in every 25, if you're good with math, was like a really bad crash. So 1 in every 5 years, the stock market falls. 1 in every 5 of those 5, it's like a bad crash, kind of like the GFC, the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, which is this one right here. The 2000s.com bust, which is there. They're typically pretty bad, or like say the COVID one here, but you'll see it kind of recovered really quickly. Um, and what it tells you, if you look at the data long enough, What it tells you is that if you're investing in the stock market, effectively, you are going to eventually experience a fall in your investments. You will. Like it's just inevitable. And if I'm being cheeky with my words, what I would say is, by definition, we're getting closer to the next market crash than the last one. And when someone first told me like that, I had to think to myself, oh, that's really interesting. So by definition, we are getting closer. But remember, all of these returns that I just quoted to you are with those things happening, right? So they're with those things happening. The bad times and the good times are all mixed in together, and it still returns pretty well. Um, this is a good question from Lexi. It's more of a tech product question for Perla. Is there any possibility for Perla to extend their available time horizon for some stocks, like 10, 15, 20 years, ideally from the original IPO? I think this would significantly enhance the platform's features for long-term investors. Good question. I'm sure that will get aired by Hayden and the team. So that's a good one, Lexi. Thank you. Um, so a common thing that I often get asked is, well, why don't I just invest in the United States? That's where all the good companies are, right? People always think that. They always like to say how good the United States stock market is. Well, this one actually shows you how good the Australian stock market is as well. While we, in recent years, we've thought, well, maybe it is falling behind a little bit. There have been periods, like decades, where Australia has done a lot better than those markets as well. So it's kind of like, but there's no like magic stock market, like one that's better than every other one. It's a pretty general consensus around the world that as long as it's a democracy, the stock market does pretty well. It tends to be when countries are not using democracy that the stock market's pretty crap, because there's really no property rights and those types of things. So the Australian stock market is actually brilliant. This chart doesn't go back far enough, but if you actually go back further, this Australian stock market's number one in the world. Number two in the world is South Africa, and number three in the world is America. More recently, though, America has pulled ahead a little bit. So let's talk quickly about what holds people back. This chart here or this kind of takeout here is actually from the ASX shareholder study, the Australian Stock Exchange's official study that they do every 3 years, I think it is. Um, and let's just go through them really quickly. This is like they categorize people as next generation investors. Don't know what that means exactly, but wealth accumulators, pre-retirees, and retirees. Um, they say overall, the top investment challenge amongst investors is it's hard to know which sources of information to trust. That's a really common one. Okay, cool. And for the younger people, it was I don't know which investments to select. For the slightly older people, maybe I'm in this one. I hope so. They say analyzing the performance of specific stocks. The next group, the pre-retirees, they say they don't know if the product providers, which is like an ETF provider or an investment platform, would act in their best interests. And the retirees say that it's difficult to identify the best companies. If you don't know, just if this is your first investment thing that you've rocked up to, when we say stocks or when we say shares, they're the same thing. And when we say companies, it's the same thing as well because a company has shares. And when you buy shares, you own part of the company. So I could say, this is a really good company. It's a really good stock. It's a really good share. It's all the same thing. Okay, so when we do these studies again and again and again, there are really common patterns of what emerges. And given this first session is all about the first $500 that you can invest, what the research shows repeatedly over like more than a decade now is there's some common concerns people have before starting investing. They say, I don't have enough money. I don't know enough. I'm fearful of losing money, and I don't know where to start. I've been reading the ASX shareholder studies for as long as I've been in this industry, and they all say the same thing. Like it's been the same, no matter what technology comes along, no matter how many good podcasts there are, or what the investment platforms are doing, it's all the same. So I've got kind of like a little cheat sheet down here. You can start with as little as $5. I'll explain how to do that in a minute. If you don't know enough, well, you're already on this webinar, so that's fantastic. So you're on the right track. No one is born as an investor. Regrettably, we don't kind of get born on, and within a year we know everything that like Warren Buffett does. We're all fearful of losing money, yeah, but as I showed you above, if you just take a long-term perspective, it kind of knocks out a lot of those myths. And you don't know where to start, well, it's pretty, well, I'll show you and we'll go through some ETFs and some shares as we go through. But it's actually pretty easy to do because once you realize you can do with $5 or $500, it's not going to ruin your life by seeing a $5 investment go down. That won't ruin your life, but what it could do is it could start your lifelong journey of learning. So I think like the first investments we ever make are the ones that are effectively our education. It's like an investment in our financial education. So let's just talk quickly about checks and balances. How do you know the thing that you're investing with is legit? How do you know you're not just getting scammed or something like you see on the news? Because the media wants to make out that like all finance is pretty bad and this grandma got ripped off and that person had this thing, fraudulent, and it's just never ending. There's a lot of good stuff that happens in finance. And one of the things about Australian finance is that it's extremely, extremely regulated. So even though we hear terrible things in the news, like the one that most recently that I can think of was something called Shield, the Shield Master Fund, and First Guardian. These were a big, like, it was a pile of crap and it was dodgy. And even though some of the people associated with that had an AFSL, which I'll explain what that is in just a minute, um, because we're so regulated, effectively, all of the people that lost their money in that are going to be compensated. So that's actually a really, really, really good outcome. It could have been way worse. So let's talk about checks and balances really quickly. So a lot of people don't know how to determine with it that if the thing that they're dealing with is legitimate or not. So before investing, ask yourself, does the thing have an AFSL? Like seriously, does it have an AFSL? Did you verify the AFSL? And do you even know what an AFSL is? And did you check the government website for the AFSL? And if you think I'm being silly, I just want you to remember, you need to go and check. All right? If you do that, 90% of the stuff, the bad stuff that happens, will not happen to you because you've checked. It's this simple, and I'm going to show you how to do it. And then once you're through that gate, if you're really worried, you can read these other documents. So read the product disclosure statement before you invest in, say, like an ETF. Read the FSG before you use the company's services. It's illegal. Both of those are legal documents. And the third one is read reviews. Um, so let's have a look at how do we do this. So let's say you are thinking of investing using a platform like Perla. What you can do is you can head to this website, which is called asic.gov.au. You can see it up in the top there of my URL. And what you can do is you can search for a name or a company. So say, for example, I've searched for Perla. I'm just going to we'll step back through it one by one so you can see. So let's say here, I won't search for Perla. Let's say I'll search for my company called the Rask Group. I can just push that in there and I can see, okay, based on this, it says status, one was ceased, one is current. It says that I'm an AFSL, an Australian Financial Services Authorized Representative. Click on that. This is the official government website. You can see where our office is. You can see what our numbers are. You can print it. You can also see what kind of license I'm using. If I was to click on this, you can see all of the other information that applies to that. So effectively, what you can see here is the government's website is telling you this is current. They are regulated, they are authorized. This is a step most people don't take. And now that I know and I'm in this world, I understand it. So let's do it again with Perla, just one more time. There won't be many Perlas, so I don't think much will show up here. So there's two different things. It's the second one we're after. We're checking that it's got this license. And we can see here it says current. So what this effectively means is the government's website is telling you this is a company that is legitimate, and that's a great first step because they're watching to make sure that Pearl is doing the right thing. So if you do that, this is a common question I get asked is how do I check? How do I know? That's the easiest way to know. Don't just take their word for it, obviously. Go and check the government's website for yourself to make sure that, okay, the government does actually say what this person is telling me or what this organization is telling me. Of course, they could still be doing the wrong thing, but at least you've checked. And then you can go through and read these other documents. But I'll continue on. And if anyone has any questions at any time, just chuck them in the chat and I'm happy to answer. Because I'm just trying to demystify how this industry works. Bring that up a little bit. So let's talk about micro investing or brokerage accounts. And before I do that, actually, I want to ask everyone a question. If you just chuck it in the chat, I would love to know when was the last time that you invested? So did you invest? Have you invested in the last? Have you invested today? It's Friday. The market is open. Have you invested in the last week, month? Uh, Tell me more. Okay, there's a few nevers. That's good because this is the session for you. Last month. Um, cool, Alison. Great, Joan. Great, Kirsty. Nicole. A few weeks ago. Never. Cool. Sarah's in there. Sweet. Never, says Tivia. Ravi says last month. Corinne says got the free shares when the company listed. That's great. I like free shares. Um, what else we got here? Leonardo says a month ago. Cool. Okay. Alicia says I invest with the minor micro. Yeah, last night it was. That's great. Angela says last week. Wow. So this is really cool. So a lot of newer investors. Some people said that they invested a while ago. Yeah, does raise count? Yeah, sure. That counts. To be honest, you know what? I count superannuation as investing. So we could all probably say, as long as we've, got a job and we're getting paid super, at least in the last, 3 months. So I kind of make this all count. Faith says weekly deposits into Perla with a monthly purchase of shares. Fantastic. Automating it. That's wonderful. Okay. So we've all a lot of us have been investing recently. Some of us haven't started, but it's probably why we're here today. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between micro investing and brokerage accounts. So to clear up any confusion here, Perla does both of these things. So that's the first thing. I just want to clear it up. Like Perla does both. So if you're confused about like what side of Perla am I on? Am I on this side or that side? You've got the ability to do both, just as an FYI. I can show you what it looks like in a sec. Micro investing is this term that's been invented to basically say um, you've got a small amount of money. Soraya, just to confirm what I just said, Perla does both of these things. Perla does it's both a brokerage platform and a micro investing platform. And I'll explain to you how that works in a minute. So micro investing is this idea that you can invest very small amounts of money, like micro amounts, versus a traditional brokerage platform, quote unquote, or broker, is this idea that you have to have a higher minimum amount. That's the only real difference. On the one hand, a brokerage platform typically starts at a $500 investment. So you have to save up 500 bucks and you can buy any share or ETF. So say, for example, if we jump back in here to Commonwealth Bank's page and we click buy, I am actually on, when I go back to my slides here, I'm on this side of the platform. So the brokerage platform side of Perla, I can choose my account. I'd have to put in 500 bucks and say, that's what I need to do. I need to get to at least 500 bucks. All right. Now, if I go over to, I'm going to see if I can do that on here. Where's my micro investments? So down here, you can see that there's a micro investing platform, right? So I could go like this, I could set a goal and I could pick my investments. And with that, I can do it with just 5 bucks. But I'll explain to you a few little quirks. So with a brokerage platform, you can pretty much go anywhere on the brokerage account and you can find shares like Commonwealth Bank, Woolworths, or if you've got a US brokerage account like say Amazon or Google shares, and that type of stuff. Um, in Australia, if you're investing in Australian companies, most of the time the platform is what we call a HIN-based platform. I'll explain that in a minute. And you can kind of invest in anything that's on the stock market. Like you go and pick, right? The way the platform makes money from you is they charge a fee, and it might be like $5 every time you buy and $5 every time you sell. So if you're playing along, you would need $505 to make the investment, right? Over here on the micro investing side, you can start at like $5. So $5 total, right? So you don't need a lot of money to get started. And the really powerful and amazing thing about this is it comes back to number one here. Point number one, I don't have enough money. Well, now that's not really an excuse. It's just a lack of knowledge because you can start with $5. Like I would say that most of the people that the ASX surveyed for their big survey is $5, like is enough for them to get involved and invest. The difference is actually what happens underneath. This one I've said here is a HIN-based structure. I'll explain what this means in a second. And this one is a custodial model. This is the difference that makes one of them able to be cheaper than the other, right? And it's up to you to decide which one you prefer. With the micro investing, you typically can't invest in everything. You typically have a few choices that you can pick from, like a menu. We call it an investment menu. It's like, hey, here's 5 different investment choices. Pick from those. Versus the HIN model or the brokerage platform side, which is saying go and buy whatever you want, basically. The difference, again, is how you get charged fees. For a micro investing platform, you might pay a monthly fee, like $2 a month or something like that, $1.50 a month, whatever the case may be, or a percentage. And that will be all laid out in the documentation that will say we charge, $5 a month, and then if it gets over this value in your portfolio, then we'll charge a percentage fee. And so that's kind of the core difference there. So Sue Ellen has asked a question, what's the difference between Perla and ComSec? I mean, other than one being yellow and one being blue, the differences are actually more so in the construction of them, Sue Ellen. So in terms of features, in my opinion, they're actually like identical. So ComSec uses a HIN-based model, and they also have a custodial model, like a micro investing side. Perla has a HIN-based model and also has a micro investing side. And in terms of like quote unquote, what's safer, let's talk about that on the next slide. So what is a HIN? HIN stands for Holder Identification Number. And what it basically means is that, Sue, if you go and invest in Commonwealth Bank shares and I go and invest in Commonwealth Bank shares, both of us have Commonwealth Bank shares, right? Yes. However, what actually happens is your shares are uniquely identified to you under your HIN, your holder identification number, because you're the holder and it identifies you by your number. So you've got those shares in your HIN, and I've got my shares of CBA in my HIN. And that's what the HIN does. Effectively, it says, these are Sue's shares, these are Owen's shares. And ultimately, the point of it is that it's meant to be safer at scale. So, in effect, the ASX, the stock market in Australia as a whole, is the one who gives you your HIN number. So when I open an account with Perla or you open an account with Perla, you get a HIN number. It's created for you. That's where the CHESS sponsored. If you've ever seen CHESS sponsored, it's like a phrase that you might see on the paperwork that they give to you. That's where it comes from. And effectively, what it means, and I did well, not me, but our team, I'm no designer, I'll tell you that much. So, in the case of a HIN-based brokerage account, it's like me and you, Sue, we have our own umbrellas. These are the HIN numbers that we are kind of underneath, and they are what identify us. In a custodial model, the way they make it cheaper and the way they have micro investing is because everyone's money's pooled in together. We can all put our monies in and we're all under one big HIN, under one big umbrella. And that's why we call it a custodial model, because there's someone who is holding our money in custody. They're taking care of it for us and they have the HIN. That's how it works. And that's why this one is able to be cheaper because everyone's costs are spread. And that's how it works. Julia asked a question. Sorry. She says, sorry if this is silly, total newbie here. If investing in a brokerage account weekly, does it get charged a fee for every deposit? So, Julia, you get charged a fee when you make a transaction, not when you deposit the money. So, when the money goes in to the brokerage account, it can just sit there in a cash account that's in your name. That doesn't charge you the fee. It's when you place a trade. That's on the brokerage side. On the custodial side, which is like the micro investing side, it's not always the case that they charge you that way, right? Because there might be a percentage or it might be a monthly fee or something like that. That's where you just go in and you read the documentation to find out how it's being done and how it can be effectively, navigated for you. Because you might be like, well, it doesn't make sense for me to buy all of my shares in little parcels. I might just want to do one big trade or something like that. And you can set through Pearl's automation features, you can set rules like that. The big question before it was from Sue, wasn't it? Yeah. Sue asking about the difference between Perla and ComSec. For me, the biggest difference is actually the automation. So like I don't like I'm in finance, guys. Here's a shocking reality. I'm in finance and I don't want to log into my brokerage account every day. I just don't want to do it. It's not where I want to hang out. So I'm quite happy to have it all automated for me. And that's probably one of the real benefits of Pearl, if you ask me. There's a few, but that's the big, big one. Um, will we have a different HIN if we invest with different platforms? Says Trang. Yes, most likely. You can have more than one HIN. Are superannuation funds custodial models, Ruth? Yes, they are. They're custodial models. Unless you've got a self-managed super fund and you invest in a platform. Um, is it, I've got to answer the question though for everyone here, maybe before I say, is it risky? This model on the left-hand side, the custodial model, is the only model available overseas. It's just that Australia has this slightly better one called a HIN model. So what that means is it's not necessarily heaps riskier to be on a custodial model. It's just important to understand the nuances of it, and why the fees are charged. Like some people say to me, "Hey Owen, why wouldn't I just go with the brokerage account that gives me the lowest fees?" I'm like, "Yeah, cool. However, like, is the one that charges you an extra dollar like better? Maybe just stick with that one." For me, I don't sweat too much over those little fees and stuff. I prefer to actually understand what's going on. And this session is all about the first $500. I know people that have portfolios that have tens of millions of dollars in them and they're on custodial models. Like, so it's not a big deal. It was what I meant to say. As long as you've got the AFSL and it's regulated and does all that, it's cool. So, Soraya, is it best to stick with one investing platform or do people use various platforms? People use a lot of platforms. I think that's a common myth is that you should only have like one platform. Um, you don't need to. Like with superannuation funds, you can have two or three or five or 10 or 50 if you want to. A lot of people like in our financial planning business, our financial planners often have more than one super fund. And you might be saying, well, why would they do that? It's because a lot of them have insurance that's better through one super fund, but they have investments that are better through another super fund. And so they use that one for investing and that one to cover their insurance costs. Because you can have some insurance inside your super, FYI. Angela, there's a good technical question you have here. If you're wanting to go from a custodial to a HIN model, do you need to sell the custodial shares to then switch across to the other side? Yes and no. Sometimes that will be determined by your brokerage account, the one that you're leaving and the one that you're going to. Most brokerage platforms have that really clearly stated. If you Google something, let's just do a live test. Let's Google Perla in specie transfer. That's what it's called. It's called in specie, which I believe is Latin for in kind, meaning that you're transferring something that is the same kind across. So you can see here, like this is the Google summary. You can transfer your existing HIN to retain all of the stuff. No cost, blah, 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 blah. So you could just go and you could look into all of the docs and stuff like that if before you do this. And of course, like read the terms, conditions, read the important legal documentation. And if you're ever in doubt, just call the brokerage account. Just like call them up. I know it's old fashioned to get on the phone, guys, but you can just call them. So Holly said, I have a micro account for my kids, but opening up a hen account for myself so I can transfer across my ComSec. Okay. Um, I can see my kids' names now in the regular account I'm setting up. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I set up something wrong. That's a good support question, Holly. I don't actually know. I don't have access to that sort of stuff. But I'm definitely, like I said, just give them a call. Even though these apps and portals and stuff are online, they want to help you because it's in their interest for you to be an investor with them. So give them a call, drop them an email, something like that. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, so Trang, good question about these custodial models. Safe. Yeah, it's what's used around the world. Um, so May said, if you've never invested before, would you suggest either the HIN or custodial model? Um, so obviously I can't tell anyone what to do, like personally. It's strictly general in nature, what I say here on the show. But what I can say to everyone here is I use both. So I have custodial stuff and I have HIN stuff. What I think about a lot is more that checking the AFSL of the company that I'm dealing with, making sure I read the documentation and the fees and stuff. And there's one, where is it? Uh, I might have to Google this as well. This one right here. So when you go to a page like you're thinking of investing in something, guys, please don't like overlook the fine print. So in even here in Perla, we can see it says at the top, like important information. You can read this thing called the PDS. This explains what micro does. So micro's other name is called Perla Investors Fund. It explains the type of people that it would be appropriate for in this thing called a TMD. It's got the financial statements. So you can see all of the data that you want there. Um, One point of maybe just one thing that I probably didn't cover before that, because most of us, I'm assuming here, use Perla. Um, when I said a HIN model before, Perla calls that Perla shares. And when I said micro investing before, Perla calls that just micro, just to clear up the language there. Um, but just go and read those things, and they explain all the fees and all that sort of stuff. So, um, Pooja, good question. Will there be any complication during tax time having multiple brokerage accounts? That's a good question. So we are going to do a tax session in a few weeks, but um, the answer is maybe. So my old co-host on the Australian Finance podcast, Kate Campbell, Kate always used to tell the story, Pooja, of how she, in her first year of investing, she opened 11 brokerage accounts. Something crazy, right? And then at the end of the tax year, she got tax statements from every single one of them. And it was wild. And she was like, I ain't doing that again. So the reality is that you still need to report tax information to the ATO. Some of it goes through what we call pre-fill. So as long as you have your tax file number with the brokerage account, it will actually sync automatically, like things like interest and all that sort of stuff that you might have to fill in. Um, Another thing, and there's two other tools that you can use, and Perla has a natural integration with them. But what one of the tools is Navexa. So Navexa is you've probably seen it on our podcast. So Navexa is a way to track your investments for tax purposes across every brokerage account. Like if you had like 10. The other one is ShareSite. Does the same thing. So you can track it across like 10 brokerage accounts if you wanted to. I just find them both to be really good just for even just like keeping track of like where things are, what your performance is. And I'm sure Zway could help me out in the chat, but there's actually a way that you can do it from your own account as well. You don't need to go and like sign up separately and whatever. So it's somewhere in here. If you jump into the archive, you could say Perla tax reporting tool. And I think it's like an extra little feature that you pay for and you get like it's like a good price and it automatically syncs all of your trades. So if you do have like a bunch of different investment strategies or whatever, you can sync it all together. That's a good question. Now, I do want to just, because we've got a little bit of time left, I do want to just quickly talk about the idea of a core and a satellite. So this is the final piece of the puzzle for getting started with $500 investments is how do I know what to buy And am I doing the right thing? So there is so much confusion about this because just in Australia, there are 2,300 different things you could invest in on the stock market. In the United States, there's over 4,000 last time I counted. Then there's everything else around the world. And then there's like 50 different podcasts, 20 different bloggers, 100 people on social media, news outlets, everyone telling you different things. So, like, what do you do? How do you figure out what to invest in? The good thing about it is that you don't, when you're a new investor, the one thing that you can do is you can treat a lot of what you're doing as a learning opportunity. As I said before, you can invest as little as $5 in the micro investing side, or you could invest 500 bucks. And I dare say that even all of us here today, if we're attending this webinar, we've probably got enough money to have a roof over our heads. We've probably got enough money to actually think about investing. So either one of these two options are good options to get started with. And even if we got it 100% wrong, we would still be okay. So we would still be okay. And so there we go. So Zway/Nick has just put it in the chat. If you want to learn how to set up the tax settings across your Perler account, you can just go in here, settings/account/reports, and you can hook it all up in here. So that will help you from a tax perspective. Great. Thanks, mate. So no matter which way you approach it, I believe that investing, the best way to invest is little bits, lots of times. Little bits, lots of times. I might even have this in my Canva library. Let's try little bits. I did this chart years ago, and I do not. I just have a bunch of baby images and QR codes. Who knows where those QR codes go? Don't scan them, please. I have no idea. But anyway, so the idea is that when you're getting started investing, start with a smaller amount and just pick what you think like is right. Don't overthink it because you're going to learn more from doing it. Some people treat investing like a university degree. They need to finish the good degree, graduate, and then they'll get the job. That's not the best way to become a good investor. The best way to become a good investor is to treat it more like an apprenticeship where you're learning on the job. That is 100 times better for you in the long run. To treat investing like an apprenticeship, not like a university qualification. I say that investing is a 3-year apprenticeship. You won't know if you're any good at it or if it's something that's like really beneficial to you until you're a few years in. Because you really need to understand, you just need to step through and take a risk. That's how I've taught people to do it over 10 years now. And it's not really until you kind of flex your muscles and you feel what it feels like to be an investor, you actually get confident from it. There's a lot of psychological studies that show once you're beyond 3 choices, you become more likely to be paralyzed by the choice. And so narrowing it down to 3 choices is probably what I want to give you today. So let's just go in and let's talk about it. So let's get rid of all these tabs. I'm a bit OCD with my tabs if you haven't noticed. So if we go down and we just talk about like a regular investment account, let's go through 3 really popular ways that people get started. So, Maya, you've asked not a silly question. There are no silly questions today or in the next webinar for what it's worth. Sorry if this is a bit of a silly question, but when you say little bits lots of times, if you get a fee with every transaction, wouldn't you risk losing a lot more than you would if you invested a larger amount initially? Sure, you might, Maya, but keep in mind on the micro investing side, you don't pay every time you make a transaction. But on the other side, you do. So on the brokerage side, which is where we are right now. But even still, think about it like this, right? We all should learn how to invest because that's what our super's doing. That's how we buy a property. That's how we start businesses. We're all investing, right? Where else can you go where you might pay 5 buckets for a ticket to the dance and like $5 gets you in the door to start learning a skill that will go with you for the rest of your life? So the way I think about it is, yeah, it might cost you $5 to transact. It might cost you, $1,000, but really the knowledge and the experience of learning is what's going to drive you and get you better over time. And I'm going to explain to you, you don't need to go and buy 50 things. You can just buy a couple of things. So let's talk about three of the most popular first investments, right? So let's actually dive down in here. Is it community? Let's go here. So one thing that Pearl does, which is really cool, is it shows you the data in real time, um, of what actually like happens. So so what is happening on the platform? So say for example, we can see that the average deposit of a Perla person is $2,800, and they make a trade on average every 2.7 weeks. Let's call it 3 weeks, every 3 weeks, and then they invest it into an ETF. All right, this is good data for us. So why don't we start with that? We'll say to ourselves, what are the three most popular ETFs that people tend to pick? All right, so let's go and look for some ETFs. In fact, I know some of them, and you guys can all put this on your list to go and research. Okay, so here we can see the Vanguard Australian Shares Index ETF, VAS. Right, I'll put this link in the chat for anyone that's on live. And if we go down, what we can actually see, and this is what's really cool, the minimum investment, $500. You see the median portfolio value, 2,700, right? So this is telling everyone we don't need to do a lot to, like, we don't need to have millions of dollars to get started in this. It shows you what the actual thing's invested in. You can see some other fun data there. I'll keep going down. And this is the one that I wanted you guys to see. So here, the general statistics of the community. 30,000 investors on Perla have this ETF. As I said, very, 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 very popular. I think it was Trang that asked before about Vanguard. Vanguard is the world's second largest kind of provider of investments, and it's accessible via Perla, which is great. And so this is the most popular ETF, exchange traded fund. I won't explain all of that right today, but it is the most popular in Australia. The average investment amongst those 30,000 people is $2,500. The last time someone invested in it was 5 hours ago. Hopefully someone on the webinar was that person. And the average time that people will hold it before making another investment is 48 weeks. So what I'm trying to get at here is put this one at the top of the list. Go and understand what this thing is. You can Google it. You can read about it on the Perla website. Good one. Okay. The other one that's very popular in Australia, I will go with, is NDQ. So this ETF is an ETF. It's like a basket of shares. Just think of ETF. When I say ETF, I mean like a basket. And what this does is when you buy it, it goes and invests your money in 100 of the world's largest companies or 100 of America's largest companies all in one go. So you buy this thing once and you get all of that stuff inside of it. And what you can see here is inside of this ETF, you've got Nvidia, Microsoft, Apple, meaning you don't need to buy shares individually. You can just buy the ETF and you get all of this stuff in there. So this is really popular. Let's go down to the community data. 11,000 people own this ETF. And the average size is $2,400. 16 hours ago was the last time someone bought it. I'll give us one more. Actually, why doesn't someone else say or suggest something that's really popular for new investors to go and consider? If you can just chuck it in the chat rather than me coming up with it all. Faith, love it. You absolutely nailed it. Astrid, good one. Corey, good one. Amelia, Lily, all of these are good. All right, I'll go with the first two because they're such good ones. We'll go with IVV. This ETF is one of the most popular investments on Perla as well. And this one invests in 500 of the biggest companies in the United States. 23,000 Perlarians? Perlers? I don't know what we call plural Perlers, but 23,000 people own this ETF, and it is a great way to invest overseas. And let's go one more, which was the other one that was really popular. And I know I said I'd give you three, because if you go beyond three, you get analysis paralysis, but I'm going to give you four anyway. This is the other Vanguard one that's extremely popular, which is VGS. VGS down here has 21,000 investors in it. Average holding is slightly larger at $3,000. If we keep going down, the age of investors, a lot of people over 35 own this ETF, and it's easy to see why. Like it's a good ETF. It's very broad. It does a lot for one investment. Uh, so, what about for those who trade ethically? Good question. So, some of the most popular ETFs, if you are thinking about, well, I want to invest, but I don't want to invest in like the naughty stuff. How do I do that? So, there are a few ETFs which allow you to do that. Again, you can just buy these in your Perler account. So, FAIR is one of them. That's the symbol. The other one is Ethy, which is this one right here, which is this ETF that invests in global shares for you, but companies that are considered sustainable. So those are some examples. We've been through Ethy, FAIR, VGS, IVV, NDQ, and VAS. I know that's a lot of gibberish, a lot of alphabet soup for you for this Friday at midday, but it's a list that you can go and start with. So you can go and look at these and be like, what was that Owen guy talking about? What does this thing actually do? How does it work? What is it that makes it this thing a good one? Why is it so popular? If honestly, if you put in 15 minutes on one of these things, you would know more than 50% of the people that you meet this weekend about investing. So just go and read what these things do, and you will be streets ahead. Um, and so back to Maya's point before, I just want to double click on that from before. So Maya asked about like having all of these things and doing too many things, and doesn't it mean that you end up paying all these fees? It does. And as you heard before, I'm not too worried about the fees. I'm more worried about everyone here learning for the rest of their life and like getting that into themselves rather than worrying about the $5 or $10 that you might pay in fees here or there. Like Scott Pape from the Barefoot Investor did a wonderful job at explaining that fees are very, very important, and I do not disagree about that, but they are definitely not everything. Um, I met a lovely woman a few years ago who came to one of the Rask events, and she had been following investment newsletters and websites and characters, let's say, for over 20 years, and she had never invested. And and what made her invest finally? It was COVID. She finally invested during COVID. Um, and I just wish that woman had even put $50 into her investment account, 20 years ago, because it would have just given her the confidence to keep going and going and going. Um, okay, so Sarah asked a good question. I saw Apple on the list for VGS, if I'm correct. Does that mean if I invest double in the same ETFs, I would invest in both? Yes. Okay, so good question, Sarah. So what you were saying is if you invested in this one, which is the top 100 US, and you invested in this one, which is the global one, so it's much more broad. It doesn't just have 100 companies, it's got like 1,500 companies inside of it. Would you have Apple in both? So within the ETF, yes, you would. So Apple's inside of this one. It's also inside of this one. And why is that the case? It's because Apple's one of the biggest companies in the world. Um, So that's one of the things to keep in mind. Sue, you've said COVID and working from home helped me start. That's really interesting, Sue, because the ASX investor study, which I mentioned before, was done in 2023, and they were using a lot of data just after the after COVID, right? When we were all in lockdown. And what they found when they did their big research of all of Australia were these really interesting trends about how many people had started investing in COVID. Because you've got to remember, we're all stuck at home and we all had money that we could no longer use. We couldn't travel, we couldn't go to the pub, we couldn't, go shopping, or some of us did online shopping, let's be honest. Some of us bought Zoom subscriptions, like myself, but I don't have one of those anymore. Um, so people did that. But a lot of people turned to investing. And we saw millions of people being really interested about this thing called investing. And for a lot of us, it kind of stuck. So um, that was like a real thing, and it's great to see. So they actually showed all of that stuff in here, like people that were like intending to be investors. This is actually the saddest one for me, is actually when they did their big bit of research a few years ago, they actually showed that 1.3 million Australians were intending to invest but hadn't invested yet. And I thought to myself, well, why not? It's $5. Go and give it a crack. Start learning, start feeling what it's like to see a stock go up and down, or see an investment go up or down. Um, so a few lessons I want everyone to take away from today, if we go back, is if in doubt, zoom out. So if you're in doubt, stretch out your time horizon. The longer you look at investing, the more it makes sense. And I don't just mean staring at the screen and being like, is this thing going to make sense soon? I mean, like, stretch out history, and you'll see that investors are the people that make money. Investors are the people that retire wealthy. Investors who zoom out and look at the long-term perspective are the least stressed. The ones who zoom in and focus on the day-to-day are the ones that are stressed. Um, pardon me. Um, you can start with $5 through micro investing. You can learn through things like this webinar. We're going to be back in a month with the next webinar. You can listen to podcasts. You can take courses. You can just catch up with friends. You can use social media. You can read the news. Are you going to lose money? Hey, guess what? Every single one of us on this call right now, how many of us are here right now? I think there's 250 of us that are here right now are going to lose money. We're all going to lose money. We're all going to lose money, but we're going to make a lot more money than we lose, and that's the difference. So that's the difference. Uh, so, good question from Lexi. Hey, Lexi, you've said, may I ask why the Rask license was ceased, and what was the reason? So you are a very sharp-eyed person there, Lexi. So why, if we go back to the Rask one, that is very, very good, Lexi. You get bonus points for today. If I can go back, can I go back? I can't go back. Um, the reason, the reason why when you search for our company in here, one says ceased and one says current, is because we, as in myself, Owen, me, we got our own license. So before this, so when it says ceased, we were acting under someone else's big license, right? But then we went through the process, and it took us like a year to get our own license. So that's why you see it looks like it's one was ceased and one was current. Great question. I'm really happy that you picked up on that. Lexi, good question. Yeah, any podcast you'd recommend? So I'll just turn off my screen now, and you can just go for another couple of minutes, and I'll answer quick questions in rapid fire. Any podcast you'd recommend, Swati? Well, absolutely, Swati. I love the Rask podcasts, but I also like do, 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 do. Caroline, what does available in super mean in the Perla platform? Well, inside of Perla, you can have a superannuation investment, like as in like a super account. You can also have a micro account, and you can have like a HIN-based or shares account. So you can have all of them in one platform. That's what that means. So some of them are available in super, some of them are available in micro, and some of them are available as regular investments. I hope that makes sense. There's a documentation online about that. Kylie's asked a fun question. Any ETFs that specifically bundle AI plus energy plus infrastructure that you recommend? Now, I can't recommend anything on like one-on-one personal advice and all that sort of stuff. However, what I could say for you to go and research in your own time, there is an ETF that I know about. It's called the it's called Artificial Intelligence Infrastructure ETF. AINF is the ticker symbol. AINF. I don't own it. It's not a recommendation, but just something that you can go and research and find out how does this thing work. And as it says on the tin, it invests in companies involved in AI infrastructure. A lot of them have something to do with energy. So, okay, did we lose my audio? How come my audio keeps getting cut out? Um, the recording will be available on YouTube. Um, when talking about the long term, says Jackie, is it still worthwhile if I'm looking at a maximum of 3 years until retirement? Great question, Jackie. I get this all the time. Most people, when they retire at 60 or 65, hopefully they're still going to live another 20 years. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see retirees make in our financial planning business is they think of retirement as kind of like the end date, when really if they think that way, they're not going to invest for growth. And if they're going to live for 20 years, they need to have some growth in their investments. So it's a good time to get financial advice, Jackie. So definitely would highly, highly recommend that. Great. Leonardo, thanks for the content. Thanks, guys. Oh, okay. There's a few questions in the Q&A tab. Geez, this is my first time on Zoom for a while. I'll try and get to these real quick. Jack said earlier on, is the US market as regulated as the Aussie market? It is. It's just regulated in a different way. Over there, they have the SEC, which is a dog that actually has teeth, as opposed to some of the other regulators around the world. You hear of all those stories of organizations in the United States or individuals like the Wolf of Wall Street going to prison. That's because they are very well regulated. Um, PowerPoint presentation, I could probably get that to you after the fact. Where Chad asked about when a person should switch from micro investing to a brokerage platform. I don't see it as a big deal. Like I do this as a profession and I have a micro investing platform and a shares platform. Um, and I have a lot of other things. Suraj asked, is there another way to put it? Micro investing is via managed funds, direct shares or ETFs. You would go with a HIN model. That's correct. So micro investing is underlying managed funds. Um, Ray said, any recommendations for trading platforms with a self-managed super fund? Yeah, so just to be clear about, um, don't have any recommendations per se, but what I would say is that all of the good investment platforms in Australia now allow you to sign up with an SMSF. Um, Ken asked about, just curious of your opinion, what is the point of owning government bonds in a portfolio? They have two selling points. It has lower volatility compared to stocks. Prices for bonds are supposed to not be closely correlated with stocks, but for a long-term portfolio, stocks have performed better. So if we want lower volatility, holding cash has the lowest volatility. So why invest in bonds at all? That's a great question, Ken. Oftentimes you get a better return from bonds than you do from cash. So you're kind of bonds are an addition. We use a lot of bonds at Rask. Um, Only now that interest rates have gone up. If interest rates were still near zero, we wouldn't use them. Good question, though. Good context. Maybe I'll do one more question. Let's have a look what we got here. Please drink some water for next time. Yeah, I actually lost my voice yesterday, so I'm grateful that I could actually even chat with you all today. APM asked a question, final one. Wouldn't it be slightly more risk if you invest in the S&P 500 as the top companies have the most space taken? And so if they had bad times, it will crash a lot more compared to something that is much more just diversified, such as VGS, with a company having an equal portion of the index fund. Good questions. Okay. So final answer on APM's question. If you use something that invests really diversified, like IVV, but then you could go even more diversified and you could go VGS and have 1,500 companies in one ETF. My opinion is that you need to know what the limit of diversification is. The way I have approached it, and I'm different to most other financial professionals potentially, is that I don't think we need to just be more diversified endlessly. I think there is a limit to how much diversification we should want. And a lot of the statistical evidence and all of the math geniuses in the crowd here can go and crunch the numbers, or you can ask ChatGPT to do it for you and get it horribly wrong because they're terrible at math. But anyway, it'll give you some false confidence. What the maths tells us is that once you have more than 20 investments that are not correlated, so you put all these different investments into one portfolio and they're not exactly the same investments, like you don't just have um, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, because they're all tech companies, right? They're all the same. You have different ones. What you do is after 20 positions, the benefit of any more diversification starts to erode rapidly. There's actually no benefit really after 30 positions. So there is a limit to how much diversification you want. That's why I would encourage everyone here to just remember you don't need to own 50 ETFs. You don't need to own 50 shares. 10 good ones will do. Like seriously. Um, so go and kind of think like that. You can learn a bit more. But hey, guys, I know I got to run now. It's more so you guys don't have to put up with me anymore. But seriously, we'll be back in about a month. So if you're on the Perla mailing list or the Rask mailing list, we'll hit you up with an email and say, hey, we're going to go live. We're going to be doing these at least monthly going forward. So you can get in contact with us. If you're not already on the mailing lists, go and do that. Like just get a free account on Pearl or a free account on Rask. Get that. And then we'll email you. So thanks for everyone. Thanks for Zway behind the Zoom today for making it all possible, and for Larissa too. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Remember, little bits, lots of times. Next market crash is closer than the last one, but that's okay because we're going to invest through it. So thanks for everything today, guys. We'll see you in a few weeks. Have a great weekend, and bye for now.